Welcome, dear listeners. You are listening to the Digi-Competence podcast with Anne Cork and Philip Ramin.
Yes, and today we're speaking to Dr. Binh Nguyen Thanh, who's the Senior Program Manager of Blockchain-Enabled Business and the Fintech-Crypto Hub Coordinator at RMIT, Vietnam. He's a leading academic thought leader in frontier fields of finance and technology, including blockchain, digital assets, digital economy, fintech and economy, and he dedicates his academic work to creating insights on how technology will bring property rights, financial inclusion, and economic empowerment to everyone in the world. A fun fact about Binh is that he meditated for 5 years every single day, and as a result, lost a decade of thought patterns. If you ask him, he says, "In my mind, I feel I'm in my 20s now." So please don't dash off now to start meditating. You can do that after the podcast. Welcome to our podcast today. Binh, it's lovely to have you.
Yes, many thanks, Anne. Many thanks, Philip. And it's my great pleasure to being here today and really looking forward to our conversation.
So are we, but before we get round to talking about your favorite topics, let's find a little bit more about why meditation makes your mind so young and flexible. What is it that fascinates you about it?
Okay, very good question. And so I think in my early 20s, I was somebody who spent a lot of time thinking about stuff, thinking about the world, thinking about myself, thinking about life itself. But during my practice of meditation in those 5 years, what happened gradually was that I was just getting rid of all of my thoughts, actually. So I could drop them down. Of course, I still think about life today, but in a much more healthy manner. It's not that I think every free time that I have about it now, but it's really focused. If I really choose to, I can think about it. But otherwise, I would just have a free mind. So, and that's why I just feel so like as if I was a lot younger than actually my actual biological age.
And why have you stopped to do that, this meditation?
Another very good question. The reason was that then after 5 years of meditation, I moved back from Germany to Vietnam.
And that was in your German time. Okay.
Yes, there I was in Germany. And then when I was in Vietnam, I felt that a new chapter of my life began, so that I would explore the outer world much more than before. In the 5 years of meditation, I just look inside a lot. And now I just feel in the past 5 years, have to be 5 years, I've looked outside a lot. I do think that I will go back to meditation at some point in time. But right now, my life chapter is more about looking outwardly.
And when you talk about the mindset that you've got at the moment, it sounds very, very fluid. How do you really feel about the word mindset? Is it the wrong term for what we should really have in our minds?
I think fundamentally, what I've realized is that humans, that we are much more than our minds. Minds and mindsets are just tools and components that we can use to solve certain problems. And they are also updating as we develop and progress through life. So I update my mindset all the time. I change my opinion. I wouldn't say all the time, but quite often about a subject. For example, when I start to look into this technology as a blockchain, I was a very big skeptic. I didn't believe it had any future. But my mindset about this has changed because the technology has changed my mindset. And I just feel, okay, mindset is something that's nice to have that can help us to solve certain problems. But the one thing is that it can be updated and should be over time, and as well as we are much more than just our mindset.
What a great way to look at things. You said that you were actually in Germany for 5 years. What made you want to be in Germany? And do you find that there are big differences thinking about technology between Germany and Vietnam?
Yeah, so to be more accurate, I spent 20 years in Germany.
Oh, okay.
In those 20 years, I spent 5 years meditating in Germany. That it was. And coming back to Vietnam, comparing Vietnam and Germany, I think my mind, or let's say my brain, is split into two halves. How I see the world. One thing is from the view of very accurate, very disciplined, and with attention to detail mind. This is more my German side, but I can also view the world from my Vietnamese side more, which is a little bit more, let's say, relaxing, and it's less rigid and it's more fluid. And I think this is also probably the way how I see technology. I think in Germany, the technology are really frontier technologies which really accurate, that require high accuracy. Whereas in Vietnam, it's really the mindset here is that people, they are willing to adapt new technologies even before these technologies may be mature enough. So I think this is one of the major differences I would see there.
So they trust themselves to risk things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, they try to experience the new technologies even if they are very early. Yeah. Whereas in Germany, you really try to deliver a full-fledged and complete product.
Mm-hmm. We will move forward to blockchain just in a second, but is there any, the one difference between, being in a university context in Germany versus Vietnam? Is there one major thing where that's really cool, or that's maybe not so cool?
I think from my personal experience is that the university life in Germany, as let's say as a professor, as a lecturer, it's a lot more, let's say, also rigid. It's quite well defined in terms of the scope and the expectations what you need to deliver. Whereas here in Vietnam, I mean, I'm in Australian university delivering educational services in Vietnam. So this is a caveat there, but definitely I see that the educational landscape here in Vietnam overall is a lot more dynamic. So we really try to keep up with the current market trends and the current industries, and really try to tackle the issues that are existing right now in our society and the economy. And partly that's why here I think we are really pushing for this new blockchain technology.
Well, talking about blockchain technology, I mean, we have, of course, a highly educated audience, but I think it's still kind of confusing with all of these buzzwords behind. Can you try, first of all, to summarize a bit the essence of the blockchain technology from your perspective?
Okay, very good question that I'm being asked a lot. So there are many views on how to see the blockchain. Let me just give one of my point of view on this technology. Okay, what is fundamentally the blockchain about? It's comparable to the internet that we have. So now we have to ask, okay, what is the internet? The internet is just my computer here in Vietnam with your computer probably in Germany or in England right now. We are just connected through a communication protocol to exchange data, right? It's just my computer sends information to your computer and your computer sends back information to me. Simple idea, but we have created a whole new digital economy, the biggest companies in human history based on that idea. The blockchain takes this idea one step further. It says, okay, not only can you transfer information, but now you can transfer information that has value. So I see the blockchain as the internet of value. So it's the next step in the evolution of the internet. Before that, we will only be able to exchange information, and we didn't know, these information have value or not right now in the internet. But if we put the information on the blockchain and then we transfer it across time and space, actually, we can make sure that the information on the blockchain have value. So now I think this is one way how I see this blockchain technology. And maybe also briefly why I think many people have difficulties with the blockchain technology is just it includes three big paradigm shifts. And normally when new technology arises, like let's say electricity or oil or steel or internet, we only have one paradigm shift, but the blockchain includes three at the same time. And let me just briefly go through these three. So, and I hope that this helps the listeners. The first paradigm shift is that data are valuable; they are assets. I think this is something that many people, I think, kind of have an idea of. Why? Because when we look at the biggest companies in the world, Apple, Facebook, Google, Amazon, basically they are just exploiting and extracting and transferring information. Right? This information could be personal data, customer data, or software. So the first thing we realize that data are assets. They are real assets, just like our house or our company or our car. They are real assets. This is the first paradigm shift. The second paradigm shift is now we can own assets, which are these data, and use them without any intermediaries. We don't need a bank. We don't even need a real, let's say, government to help us to secure the property rights. But we can just self-sovereignty have self-sovereignty over our own assets and transfer them across time and space. I think this is the second paradigm shift. I mean, if we have money in the account, we always need the bank. If we have stocks, we always need the stock exchange commission and things like this. But blockchain data, you don't need anyone. The third paradigm shift, I would say, is about now that if we accept that data are assets, we can wrap software around our assets. Right? I can split my assets into 100 million pieces and I can transfer it to 1 million people around the world in a split of a second. I cannot do that with my house. I cannot do that with my company. I cannot do that with my car. So this is also the third paradigm shift that I would see there, or why it makes the blockchain quite difficult to understand, because we have three paradigm shifts in one.
You're referring here to paradigm shifts, but is it also necessarily new technology, or is it basically just built on existing technology?
Yes, a very good point, Philip. I mean, the blockchain is based on existing technologies. It is just with the birth of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto was just able to use existing technologies like the internet infrastructure that we have, the proof of work consensus mechanism. Proof of work consensus mechanism is really how you can think about, okay, if we run a database on, let's say, 100,000 PCs, how can we make sure that they all have the same data? This is the consensus algorithm. And Bitcoin was able to solve that. And another technology is encryption, the SHA-256. It's a certain encryption methodology, and all of these already exist before the birth of the blockchain. It was just that Satoshi Nakamoto was able to construct and design a new system to transfer information that is now P2P, person to person, no intermediaries, and distributed and decentralized, and can avoid the so-called double spend problem in the digital world, that we know that each data point, so each Bitcoin here is unique and cannot be copied. Yeah.
By the way, because you just mentioned the name, do we in the meantime know a little bit more about this guy? Because I read it's quite, it's quite a mysterious person, and no one really knows where he's coming from and why he has developed this. So do you know more, maybe?
I mean, I read several books on the origin of Bitcoin and all the talk on the forum back then when Satoshi was active. But I think still today, we don't know who Satoshi is. But what we know is that Satoshi currently owns something like 1 million Bitcoins. So yeah, he has a couple of $30-40 billion net worth at this point in time, but he has not used any of them. That's a quite interesting fact, right? So I mean, we have somebody who is potentially very rich, but he or she hasn't used any of his wealth. And the second thing that we know is that also that when Satoshi left the Bitcoin project, he removed his name from the copyright of the Bitcoin software.
Really? Okay.
And yes, and he just put the copyright as a copyright holder were the Bitcoin developers. So from my view, this is a group or a person who create this and as a gift to the world, without personal interest with regards to fame or wealth. So, but yeah, I think there are some speculations who could could be Satoshi, and but I haven't seen really something that is totally convincing that it's that person.
Interesting.
And it sounds like it's really big business to be in blockchain and Bitcoin. PwC said in their Time for Trust report, the $1 trillion reasons to rethink blockchain. They said that blockchain technology has the potential to boost global gross domestic product by 1.76 trillion US dollars over the next decade. That sounds like it's the business to be in. But is it just about the finance industry? What kind of applications does blockchain cover, and will it cover in the future, do you think?
Okay, yes, very good question. And so I think, I mean, if we go back to my original point of view on what the blockchain is, right? It's the Internet of Value. Okay, so what can we do with the Internet of Value? Of course, I think financial applications are and will be big. But besides of that, I mean, if you think about something quite simple that we use in our everyday life now, if some of you may use TikTok or Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, all of these apps, what's happening there is that users create data. And if we remember that data are actually assets, so now we're creating all of these contents, the videos, the pictures, the posts, which are very valuable. But before the blockchain, we were not able to have ownership about those data. Right? And now with the blockchain, we could put all of this data that we create on the blockchain, and then we would have ownership over and property rights over our own creation in the digital space. So it's really a tool that can empower every individual, and it's not only for these types of social medias, but for any type of valuable data. For example, Google, they are collecting data about all of us. Right? And they turning them into their own assets. So now, why don't we just put our own data on something like construct like a blockchain? We have ownership about them, and if Google wants to use the data, they would need to pay the users and also need to buy from the users. Right? So as the Internet of Value, it's not only about finance, but it's also here about fundamentally changing the relationship of the existing tech companies as well as the users. And I do think, by the way, that, for example, since Elon Musk took over Twitter, I do think that the idea of a decentralized Twitter will be partly implemented in the near future. And this whole idea of decentralization actually originates in the Bitcoin or blockchain community. And we can also think about running something like a decentralized social media platform on the blockchain. Of course, right now it's still very early, and the technology is not mature enough for this. There are still a couple of things that needs to be resolved before we can run Facebook or Twitter on a decentralized network. But I think that decentralized protocols running partly on the blockchain will transform many different types of businesses everywhere where data are available. And I think as we move into the digital economy and digital society, it will be in every aspect of our life.
So if we look, let's say 10, 20 years ahead, how will blockchain has reshaped the world?
Very good question. So
what are your assumptions? I mean, we're all scientists or have a scientific background, so let's work with some assumptions.
Yes. I think my point of view is that this technology, the blockchain, it is an empowering technology. Who does it empower? It empowers the users. Actually, every user in the world, 8 billion people. It's really empowering 8 billion people. And who is getting their power withdrawn from? From the big tech companies. So my point of view is that in 10, 20 years of time, we will have created new types of big tech networks, big tech platforms, which are running partly or only on the blockchain. And these new applications on the blockchain, they will be bigger than I would think today, Google, Facebook, Amazon. And it's just that why do I think so? Because here, if we look at human history, the past, let's say, 100 years, what was the key theme in the past 100 years? Across all countries around the world, actually, the key theme was that we secure property rights for everyone in the physical world, right? So that we would mostly get rid of things like slavery, so people could have claim on the fruits of their labor. And as this happened, people were more incentivized to create more physical economic goods and service. And that's why we have all these prosperities today in the physical world. Now, if we look at the current stage of the digital world, right, we don't have any property rights. We do not have any, let's say, voting rights even about what's happening in the digital space. And as we bring property rights and voting rights, governance into the digital space through the blockchain, we see, I think we will see a similar explosion in value creation. Because now if I can own my own picture, my own video, my own post, or my own data, I'm incentivized to create a lot more data. And this can be very valuable for the platform, for different users on the network. So I think this will be unlocking a lot of economic wealth creation in the digital space.
Do we then need a completely different economic system? I mean, it would challenge macroeconomics eventually, right?
Yes. I think it's already challenging, Philip, honestly. I mean, if you think about even the first application of the blockchain like Bitcoin, right? I mean, today, I think every government official has to have an opinion, whether they are supporting it or they are against it. Everybody get asked about Bitcoin nowadays, and even the Secretary of the Treasury in the U.S., Miss Janet Yellen, just 4 weeks ago, and then she had to give a presentation and address Bitcoin specifically, and also Satoshi Nakamoto specifically. So I think it's already big enough so that people have to think about this. And even now, 2 countries around in the world, El Salvador and Central African, they also already using Bitcoin as legal tender there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we not only see that the blockchain really challenged the current financial system, but it also may challenge the current way how we interact in a society, right? In the current society, we have a lot of centralized institutions who govern rules and who make sure that everything, all of the interactions are in line with the regulations that we have. But okay, maybe some point in time, we were able to map regulations on the blockchain, because regulations, what are they? They are just information. And why do we have to store them in books? Why don't we store them in the digital space and enforce them directly in the digital space, right? So I think the blockchain will emerge as a competing institution compared to, let's say, a corporation or a bank. We have a new types of institution in the digital space. So I definitely foresee this coming.
Been, it's very interesting thought that the big tech industry is creating a possibility to liberate oneself from the big tech industry. That was a wonderful thought that you put over. But let's think about, what about smart contracts? Will we go with Bitcoin into the area where we liberate our business such that we can do business directly with machines and not with people anymore?
I think this is, let's say, a likely scenario in the long run. So I mean, if you think about, let's say, a structure like a company, right? Or why do we actually need a company? It's actually only people working there, right? So why do we need a company? Okay, it's because we will write certain obligations and also entitlement, who gets what, when the revenue of the companies are being generated, for example, right? And now, okay, if we map this into the digital space, then probably I can work with you and Philip really quite on a peer-to-peer basis. We only need to dock ourselves to a blockchain that we, with the rules that we both agree on, that we can participate. And moving forward, one day I definitely foresee that a lot of the economic interactions in the digital space happen between humans and just a piece of code. To some extent, it is already happening today. If you think about decentralized exchanges or decentralized financial applications where you can get a loan, for example, you can get a loan without interacting with a real person behind. It's just, okay, I take my Bitcoin or my Ethereum, and then I just search for a code, a software protocol, and applications that I like to use. I just put my Bitcoin Ethereum in there, and then the code will automatically give me the loan that I want to have in US dollar crypto, for example, US dollar stable coins. So it's already happening. And as we move more to the digital space, I do think that this is going to be a much bigger story. And the smart contract is a foundation for that. Having said that, I think that in order for us to scale smart contracts, there are still some technical issues and legal issues that are associated with that. And it will take time. It will take time. I think 10 years at least before we see that smart contracts can be applied on a large scale in our daily economic interactions.
That's another question I have in my mind. I mean, we've been talking now about blockchain for a while, and you know, we see the hype around the cryptocurrencies and so on and so forth. But my perception is a bit that things progress relatively slowly. So the big expectations could not be fulfilled yet. So what is the missing dot? You were mentioning legal. I'm convinced that maybe also that some institutions are not so happy about it, not really supporting it, technical issues. But what is the missing puzzle pieces? Is it infrastructure? Why is it so slow?
Yeah, I think I mean, this really reminds me of the early internet days. I think Philip and Anne, if you remember, when we go back to 40 years ago in the 90s, right, early 90s, the first time when we had internet, it was really, really slow. I think no one of us could have imagined that we would have a video call today, right? I mean, without any efforts, it's just almost free, right? And very easy to set up. And the same is for the blockchain. It really needs time. The infrastructure needs time to be ready. It's not only the infrastructure, it's really, there are big issues right now in terms of scaling this. How can we scale the blockchain? And it's still an ongoing process. So I'm optimistic that it will be resolved in the long run, but right now it still needs a lot of brain power in order to solve this question. And another very big bottleneck that I see is that the understanding, the knowledge about the blockchain is so limited, and so few people around the world actually understand it. Even though, let's say, we have around 200 million, 250 million people who own crypto, but I would say probably 80% of them do not really understand this technology. So it's very early, Philip, and there are a lot of hypes and promise that has been made in the past couple of years. I think we will get there, but we have to be realistic. Just as the internet couldn't scale in the 90s, and even in the 2000s, it couldn't scale, right? in the 2010s.
Yeah,
This is where it
absolutely.
gained traction and really was able to scale. I remember when Amazon stock was trading at $5 in year 2001, and today it is at over $3,000. And I think in 2001, not many people believe in that idea of e-commerce, and it's only 20 years ago. And now let's just move forward 20 years, and I'm quite optimistic that we would have to resolve the issues around the blockchain, then have update the knowledge, and then we see applications in our everyday life.
You were mentioning competence, and I mean this is the topic which is really fascinating us. This is really what we're dealing with when we support companies and so on and so forth. And actually, we implemented a project a couple of years ago. Actually, it was last year for a cluster region in Germany. There's this region of Mittweida, and Mittweida is one of the leading blockchain regions in Germany. And we wanted to find out how well educated are people in this region about blockchain. It was somehow disappointing, first of all, to motivate people participating in our survey, but then also seeing the results. So if we break it down a little bit, what does blockchain competence mean? I mean, do we need to educate people really about this overall technologies, which are somehow sophisticated, or is it enough to understand the principles, the context, the applications, and so on and so forth? So what do we need? I mean, what kind of blockchain do we need in order to also foster the technology as such?
Yeah, I think it's a quite vast area.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, it's a quite vast area in terms of blockchain competence, and it has many different levels, I would say. I think for someone who just tries to implement the blockchain into some existing businesses, or even for entrepreneurs who wants to create new business solutions, it would be enough for them to understand where we can apply the blockchain. But it's really because the developers, okay, they can solve this. I think right now there's a really big mismatch between the developer side and the people on the business side. So when I talk to developers, okay, I mean, they don't have any problems with implementing a blockchain solution or writing a smart contract. That's not a problem. But how to bring this and align this with the business so that new products can be delivered in such a way that helps the business to grow. I think this is a very big bottleneck here, because normally business people, right? I mean, they understand the internet now after 40 years of really applications running on the internet, and they have a quite confident knowledge, but they don't really understand the blockchain, most of them. So I would think that this bottleneck needs to be resolved, and we are trying to do it at RMIT because we offer a whole specialization in blockchain consisting of 8 different courses, which are really for business people. It's not for tech people. It's really for business people, so that they can understand the different implications and applications of the blockchain. But let's say if it's I need to recommend the first starting point, it's really people need to understand Bitcoin first, and this is already takes some time. And if you understand that, you will be able to understand whether it makes sense for you to integrate blockchain into your existing business solution or not.
What about the development side, Binh? We've read that there are about 3,000% need for blockchain developers, more need than is actually on the market, and the need is at the moment it's in the US very, very high, and in Asia very high, not quite so high in Germany as we'd hope. What kind of things do people need to be learning to move into that field, and is it possible to move into blockchain development as a fresher?
I would think that it's just like any, let's say, quite applied programming language. It's not too difficult to learn, in my opinion, from my experience. But I think the question is really, does it make sense to learn about becoming a blockchain developer, or does it make more sense to really learn it from the view of the business creator, entrepreneur, because as you have mentioned before, right? So some studies, they highlight the chances for blockchain unlocking trillions-dollar worth of business opportunities. So I think that, okay, people can start to be build a career as blockchain developers, but I would also arguably say that at least there are equally amount of opportunities for business people to build blockchain solutions for existing business or create totally new businesses. So it's not too difficult to learn, but the question is, does it make sense for each individual to learn and become a developer?
So you'd see every CEO needs to have a basic knowledge of what blockchain can do. Is that your message?
Definitely. I do think this is one of the most disruptive technologies of our lifetime. And I'm talking to the biggest, let's say, companies, financial institutions in Vietnam about this. And a fun story is that, a couple of years ago, when we start talking about the blockchain, not really. Most people were not so much interested because they didn't see the future for that. But I think the mindset of people have changed. So now I think they think they need to learn about this, and I do think that every major business leader needs to update their knowledge in this very frontier area. It's still very early, and there's still a lot of opportunities. So it would be a very missed opportunity if people wouldn't put some time into this.
It's also very early area of NFTs, and this is such a crazy buzzword at the moment. And I'm thinking a lot about it, to be honest. We're getting also the first requests from our clients in order to educate them. But personally, I'm actually quite skeptical when it comes to NFTs, because I really do not get the value of it. I don't really see it. So what's your thoughts about NFTs? Is it the big new thing? Should we all go into it? Or what's your take on that?
So I would think that NFTs is non-fungible token. What are they? So if you think about, go back to the blockchain technology. So on the blockchain technology, we can input data there. Right. So one type of data are fungible tokens, which are like Bitcoins, Ethereum, for example. Right. So one Bitcoin, we can stack it on another Bitcoin. So then we don't know the difference. It's basically the same types of data. Right. So then we can also input non-fungible token, so a data which is unique and distinct on the blockchain. And this represents just a unique entry on the blockchain. And now, since at the beginning I told you we can wrap software around data and assets, right? So now if we take this piece of entry on the blockchain and now we wrap software around it, we say, okay, if you own this data, you have access to, let's say, special services of a company, right? And then probably it has value, right? Or Philip, you can just say, if you own this Philip NFT 2.0, you can have dinner with Philip exclusively. Okay. Right? Does it have value or not? Yeah. Probably, right? Well. It will have some value, right? Probably.
But then it depends on how you connect it with other stuff. Maybe with
yes. Right. And the point here is that it's an entry on the blockchain, and now we can wrap software around it. And what software can we around it? There are infinite possibilities what can be done with this entry on the blockchain. And as people create a consensus, a social construct around this, we were able to see that some of these NFTs will maybe very valuable because it creates certain utilities for the people who are holding it. And moreover, I would also think that value is something quite subjective, right? So I mean, some people would pay $10,000 or $20,000 for a Rolex or Patek Philippe, even though on the black market there is a copy of the Rolex or Patek Philippe for $100 or $200, right? Of course, the fake one is not as valuable as the real one, but still, we have the subjective value over even physical objects. And now we also have subjective value over digital object, right? You may not think that this entry on the blockchain, it's only an entry on the blockchain, is valuable, but somebody else who really wants to have the first entry, first non-fungible token on the Ethereum, like the CryptoPunks, I think it's very valuable to them. Then it's a social contract that creates value for these NFTs besides of utility. I think both utility as well as the subjective value over an NFT can create the value for the NFTs. But I understand your concerns, Philip, that, I mean, now there are so many different NFTs that being generated. It's like in the physical world, we generate so many different fake Rolex or different products, but only a few of them will become very valuable. The same will happen to NFTs.
Right.
When we go into blockchain, though, it really is revolutionizing the supply chain scenario. Does that mean that business owners that are not in the finance industry need to be aware of what actually is happening in that world, because basically they're liable for false products or parts of products, and they need to understand the background? Or do you think it's enough just to let the IT department deal with all of that?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely potential for the blockchain, specifically in a logistics and supply chain. Again, we need to connect it. Why do we need it there? Yeah, because we need to transfer valuable information. And are there valuable information in the supply chain? Yeah, potentially, probably, right? Most likely that we want to know where this item is coming from, through which space this has traveled through, what has been the whole journey of this parts and components, or the final parts even. I mean, things like this, I think there are definitely some real value that can be added when we apply the blockchain in this field. But again, I think it's people need to have a broader view on this technology. This is really an enabling technology. It's not only uplifting current businesses and practices and products, but it's also give opportunity to create totally new types of businesses and products. And this is where I think the big value creation will happen as new entrepreneurs or existing businesses create new services. I mean, for example, let me just give you an example. Let's say today, Facebook announced that they will issue certain Facebook either NFTs or even a Facebook token. And people using this Facebook token or NFTs have certain special rights, or can vote over certain protocol changes on the Facebook protocol, and are entitled to receiving some types of, let's say, revenue or some types of dividends from Facebook as a company. Well, I think this will probably create a total new way how users interact with the Facebook platform and the protocol, and potentially then giving more people the tools to create even more value in the Facebook network, just based on this token economy that Facebook has created. So yeah, I think it's uplifting existing businesses and creating new ones.
Time flies with you, and I would have so many more questions actually on my list, to be honest, but we are running a little bit out of time, and we want to conclude our podcast like we do it with all of our valuable guests. And we have prepared two questions, and the first one would be a little bit about what seems to be extremely important topics for you in the next weeks, months, and years. So what kind of topics are extremely important for you, and you can answer this question from a personal view, from a business view, from a society view. So whatever you want.
Well, I think in let's say in the short term, it's would be really important that that we get policymakers and regulators around the world just take the time and understand this technology to regulate it in a healthy and responsible manner to help the innovation grow, but still to protect users, investors, and stakeholders in the system. So I think we are just in the middle of this whole big discussion about the future of the blockchain. And I do think that this technology brings economic empowerment, financial inclusion, financial freedom to everyone in the world. And it's such an important topic, and we really need to see that the regulators and the industry are moving in tandem here together to really bring and deliver the promises that the blockchain can fulfill. So I see that the big theme for the coming time are really the policymakers and the industry, that they are working together.
Great, Binh. My last question would be, if you could give a recommendation to people, what should they be learning? What would be your 3 top things that people should be learning to be fit for the future?
You mean in general or related to the blockchain?
Whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I think people just need to look at what are the disruptive technologies of our lifetime, and then build their career and their businesses around that. So I think, in my opinion, we have a couple of very disruptive technologies for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I would think the first one is really energy. So if we can move to a world where we get abundance in energy, cheap energy, renewable energy, clean energy, I think this is a really big shift for humanity. It's the uplift in the whole human civilization. So I think definitely energy. Then we have, of course, artificial intelligence, I would think. So this is also a driving force, and will be a very, very powerful force in 10, 20 years of time. So we have more data, and this AI also becomes a lot smarter and a lot more powerful. But having said that, I'm not a really big fan of AI, honestly, because it's a little bit of a tool for the big tech companies. It's not really for the people. So then the third technology is, I think, the blockchain, which really is for the people. It's built for the people. It's built by the people, and it empowers people. So these 3 major areas of technologies, I would think, will transform many, many businesses and create a lot of opportunities. So I really hope and can recommend the listeners to explore these 3 areas of disruptions that are going to come.
Explore the opportunities of disruption. What a great conclusion. Thank you so much for being our guest. It was so interesting and fascinating talking with you. So what a great pleasure to have you.
Yes, it's my great pleasure. And many thanks, Philip. Many thanks, Anne.
I have to say thank you too. That was our conversation with the man with the 20-year-old mind who works for the industry that's liberating us from big tech, the enabling freedom bringer for the people, blockchain. That was our conversation with Dr. Binh Nguyen Thanh, who's the Senior Program Manager of Blockchain-Enabled Business and the Fintech-Crypto Hub Coordinator at RMIT in Vietnam. And if you would like to send us a suggestion for a guest who's just as interesting as Binh has been today, then just send us an email at podcast@i40.de, and we will be delighted to have a look at whoever you've sent. If you follow our hashtag DigiCompetence podcast, then you'll see what is happening in our podcast other than this conversation today. And those of you who've listened before know that Philip and I are doing little somersaults if you're with us the next time, when it's time for Staying Digitally Competent with Philip Ramin and Anne Kowak.